8-year-old attacked while other kids joined in.
When I seen the videos, it just broke my heart because my baby was crying out for help.
Now that little girl's family is demanding answers from the district.
Nearly 2 weeks.
Fox 5's Joy Dukes joins us live with what we're learning about today's arrest. And Joy, whether there's any connection to that shooting.
Hey, yeah, Russ, Courtney, right now we are outside of American Wings and Seafood on Cleveland Avenue, where a security guard was shot and killed while getting out of his truck for a shift earlier this week. Right now, Atlanta police say they cannot confirm whether the person that they arrested here earlier this afternoon is the suspect they were looking for in that case, but friends of the victim and neighbors are hopeful they'll have an answer on that soon.
Hours after an arrest was made in the area where a security guard was gunned down on Monday, a heavy police presence in this Cleveland Avenue shopping center drew quite a few bystanders.
I'm hoping that it brings a little bit closure to the family.
Surveillance video released by Atlanta police captured the moments 51-year-old Anthony Frazier was shot at point-blank range while one man watched.
It's sad. Like, you done took a man away from his whole family for what? Something you can go out and work for? You know, it's sad.
The video also shows several people robbing him as he laid there on the ground.
This man laying down dead and you taking stuff out his pocket. Like, come on, not one, not two, but three? It's sad. Like, it's unforgettable, and I think they should be charged as well.
Anthony Knowlton was one of those who came to the scene this afternoon after the arrest. He's a longtime security guard in the area who worked with Frazier for about 3 weeks before he was killed.
He was a good guy. You know, it didn't bother nobody, and he was a good worker. You know, so that's the reason I was so anxious about catching this guy.
Atlanta police have not released the identity of the person who was arrested or confirmed he has any connection to the Frazier case, but residents and friends of Frazier are hoping it's him.
Just a sad story here. A lot of people looking for answers. Again, Atlanta police have not confirmed whether the person they arrested here earlier today has any connection to Frazier's case. The Crime Stoppers is still seeking tips. You can call them at 404-577-TIPS. You can also head over to their website at stopcrimeatl.com if you have any information that can help lead them to a suspect. We're live on Cleveland Avenue. Joy Dukes, Fox 5 News.
Joy, thank you. A Fox 5 News alert. In southwest Atlanta, they found a 39-year-old dead from a gunshot wound. Investigators say they believe the deadly shooting stemmed from a robbery.
We can confirm that the individual that is deceased at this time might have come into some money in which some individuals might have been interested in obtaining.
Investigators say they have some surveillance video and have interviewed several witnesses.
All right, turning now to year-old Christian Eppinger into custody on an outstanding warrant for aggravated robbery and assault February 7th in southwest Atlanta, when prosecutors say Eppinger opened fire, shooting the officer.
Where he shot one of Atlanta's finest, an officer, and he shot him 6 times. He really attempted to assassinate him. Just by the grace of God, this officer lived.
Eppinger has a lengthy criminal record. He was released on probation in May of 2021 after serving 4 years for a 2016 armed robbery conviction. Willis says Eppinger continued his life of crime and committed robbery and aggravated assault last October. Then in January of this year, Willis says he committed car theft. After learning Judge Manning had granted bond in the October case, Willis said she and Fulton County Sheriff Pat Labatt filed an emergency motion for a bond revocation hearing.
And a judge here decided to grant him a bond over the opposition of the state. And that is why we are so offended. We do not believe, based on the fact that he had already been revoked on his probation, he had such crimes of violence already against him, that was an inappropriate act. I want to be very clear for the public, though. Mr. Eppinger is not getting out of jail.
Regulators fined the company close to $140,000, saying their investigation found obvious hazards to employees regarding the use of firearms and management's failure to fix those problems. Well,
the shakeup comes a little more than a week after President Biden announced he was nominating Steve Dittelbach, who served as U.S. Attorney in Ohio from 2009 to 2016, to run the agency. In the interim, the administration will put Gary Restaino in charge. While Dittelbach's nomination wades its way through the Senate, the current acting director, Marvin Richardson, is being demoted to deputy director and will remain at the ATF for now to advise Restaino. Though the new acting director may be there for some time, both Democratic and Republican administrations have failed to get nominees for the ATF position through the politically fraught Senate confirmation process. Only one nominee has been confirmed since 2006. Former President Donald
Trump, that's up to them. You know, mask rules are changing so quickly, it's hard to keep up, even for the White House. A federal judge struck down the public transportation travel mask mandate on Monday. The Biden Justice Department said it was prepared to fight the ruling.
Yeah, the Justice Department argues the mandate is a, quote, valid exercise of the authority Congress has given the CDC to protect the public health. Now government lawyers are waiting to hear from the CDC.
Potato.
Reinstating the mask mandate would require yet another court battle.
Has been overall confusion for quite some time about everything from vaccines to masks. This continues that.
While masks are up in the air for public transportation, the FAA has made their zero-tolerance policy for badly behaving travelers permanent. In Washington, Lauren Blanchard, Fox News.
One of China's largest cities is finally starting to reopen following weeks of strict COVID-19 lockdowns. For the first time in weeks, the Chinese Ministry of Health says that in some parts of Shanghai, the virus is, quote, under effective control.
That there's somebody with a rifle or a pistol behind every blade of grass. And the Japanese actually said that about trying to invade the mainland of America. Ukraine's pretty much the same way. You know, they're fighting for their freedom. They're fighting for their families.
You know, the American military prides itself on not doing things like killing civilians or hitting soft targets, things like places of worship. However, it is clear the Russian military is not adhering to those rules.
If you look at
probing for weak points in Ukrainian defensive lines. The Kremlin's stated goal is the capture of the Donbas, the mostly Russian-speaking eastern region that is home to coal mines, metal plants, and heavy equipment factories. The tactic would give Putin a badly needed victory 2 months into the war after the botched attempt to storm the capital Kyiv. Analysts say the offensive could devolve into a war of attrition, though, as Russia runs up against Ukraine's most experienced, battle-hardened troops who have been fighting pro-Moscow separatists in the Donbas for the past 8 years.
is that the Russians, you know, they don't adhere to that because they believe that they're above that. I'm glad to see that the Ukrainians are fighting back and they're keeping, you know, they're not bombing civilian targets.
McCormick adds many of the Russian soldiers going into battle in the Ukraine don't want to be there, and thousands of them will die in battle. I'm Frank McCaffrey reporting.
Meanwhile, the number of people fleeing the country topped 5 million. The Kremlin said it submitted a draft of its demands for ending the war, and the West raced to supply Ukraine with heavier weapons. With global tensions running high, though, Russia has also reportedly launched the first successful test of a new type of intercontinental ballistic missile, the Sarmat. President Vladimir Putin boasted it can overcome any missile defense system and make those who threaten Russia, quote, think twice. The Pentagon said it wasn't considered a threat.
Holocaust survivor who hid from the Nazis in a basement, only to die in a basement 81 years later. Today, another deadline came and went for Mariupol's diehard defenders to lay down their arms and surrender to these pro-Russian soldiers. But they refused to give up, barricaded inside a steel mill with hundreds of soldiers and civilians. This commander begs the world for help on Facebook. We're maybe facing our final hours. We're outnumbered 10-1. Please take us to safety, he says. Elsewhere in the Donbas region, Ukrainian forces are fighting off heavy attacks as Russia concentrates its invasion on eastern Ukraine. They're trying to surround us, says this Ukrainian soldier. To the north in Kharkiv, the killing has become so routine, the living have become numb. Wherever Russian boots march, they leave behind bodies and booby traps. Russian soldiers are gone now, but what's so haunting is you don't know what they've left behind. This yellow dot means that it's already been cleared of mines, but that question mark means that this property over here, it could be booby-trapped. Ukrainian forces tell children what not to play with and risk their lives to defuse the tools of terror. But sometimes, like these 3D miners, they become the victims themselves. And it's no wonder so many Ukrainians continue to flee the country. The UN reports more than 5 million people have left since the start of the invasion, calling it a staggering number and Europe's worst refugee crisis since World War II. Nora?
Chris Livesay, thank you. Ukraine's
howitzers bound for Ukraine. At the White House, President Biden met with his top military commanders to discuss, among other things, U.S. military aid to Ukraine.
Weapons and ammunition are flowing in daily.
Ukrainian soldiers have begun learning how to use the howitzers, which takes a week. A week they may not have before the Russian offensive hits full throttle.
Time is not our friend, and the clock is a bit of an enemy here, too.
Even if they arrive in time, 18 howitzers are only a fraction of what the Ukrainians need. Although later this week, President Biden is expected to order a dramatic increase in artillery for Ukraine.
I think there's a slowly emerging awareness that they have to do more to ensure Ukrainian success.
Retired Army General Michael Repass says artillery could blunt the Russian offensive.
The artillery that we're giving them is a method to counter that artillery fire that the Russians are pouring onto the Ukrainian troops and also onto the civilian communities.
The Russian plan calls for sending some 90,000 troops to encircle the Ukrainian army in the east. Artillery plus real-time battlefield intelligence provided by the U.S. could give the Ukrainians a fighting chance.
Battlefield math holds that the offense needs a 3-to-1 advantage over the defense in order to break through. Right now, the Russians do not have a 3-to-1 advantage in eastern Ukraine. Nora?
That's some significant as well. A harsh Kremlin crackdown on dissent, as well as Western sanctions, have driven hundreds of thousands of Russians to seek safety and freedom in the West. Passport offices have been flooded, with travel visas and airline tickets almost impossible to secure. Lilia Luciano has one family's story.
Yulia, her 2 children, and the few things she carries with her are now tucked into small spaces at her sister Olga's home near San Francisco.
When do you start suspecting that you didn't really have a future in Russia?
I think the strangest thing is I could even now have a future in Russia, building my career, raising my kids, but I don't want to be scared for them to be persecuted for something.
In the largest country in the world, there's little space for dissent. Protests against the invasion have met harsh crackdowns. News outlets are being silenced, and new laws threaten jail time for spreading so-called misinformation about the Russian military.
I'm actually very angry that I had to go, but what did it for me was another of Putin's speeches when he said, when he mentioned atomic weapons and things, I was like, now I'm scared.
Yulia, her sister Olga, and her brother Yakov are all U.S. citizens. Their parents fled the Soviet Union in the 80s as political refugees, but after college, Yulia returned.
Russia was very exciting. It was new, there was so much happening, and it just seemed very free. Cut 20 years later, I'm a refugee again.
Retracing the steps of her parents.
I'm trying to fight the feeling of being a failure. It's like my parents did so much to get us out. And here I am again.
Yulia and her 2 children are dual citizens. That American passport makes them the exception, giving them an easier way out. But she left behind her 93-year-old grandmother who didn't have a visa. Her brother Yakov, visiting Moscow from his home in Massachusetts, took over to try to get her out. But he soon realized what he was up against.
We talk to almost every U.S. embassy in Europe.
Seeking freedom or fleeing the crushing consequences of sanctions, many Russians are trying to escape. But where Europe is opening doors to Ukrainian refugees, Russians are finding a dead end.
It's really tough for Russia.
Anaida Sadikian is an immigration lawyer in Los Angeles helping Russians file asylum claims.
All the sanctions that Western countries took against Russia, there is basically no flights. It's really hard to get out of right now.
Out of options, more Russians are heading to Mexico where it's easier to get a tourist visa. They then make their way to the U.S. border, where many are now camping out along with Ukrainians and Central American refugees seeking asylum. More than 7
civilians from Mariupol. They say they are willing to negotiate to help people who are still trapped there, potentially by handing over Russian prisoners of war. Diane.
Bradley Blackburn in New York. Bradley, thank you. A wildfire burning near Flagstaff, Arizona has tripled in size, forcing hundreds of people from their homes. Strong winds have fanned the tunnel fire, which has burned more than 19,000 acres. More than 24 structures have been destroyed. The cause of the fire, which started on Sunday, is under investigation. Forecasters say strong winds that are expected to ramp up today could lead to explosive growth in wildfires burning across the Southwest. The production company overseeing the movie set
location. All eastbound lanes of the interstate were closed for an extended period of time. You may have noticed several
for a Queen Elizabeth, that is. The toy company released the Royal Barbie in honor of the Queen's 96th birthday and just ahead of the Platinum Jubilee. For more news, download the CBS.